please make your way to your seats. We're going to start very soon. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for CocoaHeads 127. We have a lot to cover tonight before we can get to the presentation, so I'll try and fly through all of the boring stuff and the announcement this evening. And let's start with the program. So I'm going to try and fly through this intro, and we're going to have 4 presentations tonight. The first one from Priance, who will explain how he became an iOS developer and the resources that helped him on his journey. Then we'll have Jant, who will tell us about property wrappers that will be introduced in Swift 5.1. Then we'll have a break and question time, and I'll explain a bit why we have question time during the break. And after the break, we'll have Mark telling us how to make nice icons. And finally, Matt, who will present about how to deploy using AWS Amplify for iOS apps. And after that, we'll have more question time, and then we'll have Irish times. So upcoming events, we have the Hack Night next Wednesday next week. So that's an alcohol-free event. And after that, we have the Drinks Night, which is a hacking-free event. So it's now split 2 different events. There's also the GDG July meetup. It's a Christmas and July theme this month. And then we have our next meetup in August, on the 8th of August, where the main host, the organizer, will be Renaud. If you want more information about upcoming events, I suggest you check the meetup.com pages for Melbourne CocoaHeads and GGG Melbourne. And okay, let's do the boring stuff. The toilets are at the back left, passing the front door. It's signed from there, you can't miss. The emergency exit is the door from the one you came in, but I hope we won't need to use it. And I'll be taking pictures tonight during the presentation. If you don't want to be on the pictures, just let me know so I won't publish it, or I'll delete it if it's already published. All right, I've talked a fair bit, and I'll talk a bit more later, but now is your time. Have you shipped anything this month? Have you released a library? Have you published a gist or whatever it's pronounced? Yeah, so if you have, please raise your hand and tell us about it.
I didn't know I was going to have to speak. I wrote complimenting someone who wrote something about Swift UI, and I took his code and ported it to the watch.
All right, and where can we find that?
GitHub.
All right.
Look for my name.
All right, thanks.
That's true. So my name is Alex. You can see I've got a bit of a disease collecting these pins. So to commemorate the release of my app called Autoboss, thank you. So the app is designed to try and simplify the ordering process when it comes to ordering food. So imagine yourself having to go do the coffee order for the workshop or for work, pass your phone around, everyone speaks their order, and if you're the unlucky one to go and collect it, at least you've got a list that you're never going to stuff up someone's order. So if you want, I've got some pins, magnetic as well as regular pins. Come and see.
Right, what's the name of the app?
It's called Orderboss.
Again?
Orderboss.
Autobots.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
The wrong time?
All right, that's fine. If you haven't chosen anything, that's all right.
Hello, I'm Matt. I'm going to be moving back to Melbourne next month. So I will be looking for a local gig. Remote work is fun, but it's lonely, and I need people, and people are awesome, and the Melbourne community is awesome. So yeah, if you need a local iOS developer who has opinions, come chat to me. And yeah, let's chat. Grab a coffee.
All right, thanks, Matt. All right, remember you don't have to wait this event or next month event. We have a jobs channel on Slack, so you can join Slack and you can mention if you're looking for someone to contract or if you're looking for work. You can mention that on the jobs channel on Slack. All right. At Melbourne CocoaHeads, we want to make sure that it's a community that's welcoming for everyone and that everyone can feel safe. And this is really important for us. So we have a code of conduct. And more importantly, there's a process to report a breach or if you think anything is wrong. So if you are being harassed or if you notice that someone is uncomfortable, please come and contact us. You can contact us in person during the event. Anyone that has a red sticker is an organizer. You can also send an email to that email. Or we also have an anonymous form that you can use. If you can't write down that URL, it's linked on the Code of Conduct page on the website. Yeah. Another aspect of making a great community welcoming for everyone is make sure that we're asking good questions that are not comments or opinions, but that are contributing to the topic. And remember that saying I don't know from a speaker is a totally acceptable answer, and we are not here as an audience to catch all the little mistakes that they could make. So although this is an important point, I would like to introduce something we're going to do this month. We're going to try something different with the questions, and that's why I was mentioning question time during the break. So this month, we're going to do something different, and we're going to try and see how it works and if it works well for us. So we're not going to take any questions neither at the end of the presentation. And the questions will be offline after the talks during the break. And we think that it's going to be easier for the speakers, so they won't be in the spotlight on stage answering one person while everyone else is listening. And also it may help make the evening flow a little bit better. So I've talked to all the speakers tonight, and they all agreed to stay and stick around during the break that's going to be after their presentation. So we have 2 breaks, 2 presentations, 1 break, 2 other presentations, and then 1 break. So if you have questions, if you want to discuss about the topic that they presented, that's the right time. We will gather feedback from you tonight on Slack, on Twitter, on email, whatever. Come and talk to the organizers and let us know what you think, if you think it wasn't good or if it was good for some reason, and we'll see and we'll assess next month. Finally, you may have seen during the intro slide while we were waiting, we've started introducing name tags a couple of meetups ago. And red dots are organizers, and blue dots are newcomers, people who are new to the community. So take a second to look around and see who has a blue dot around you and try to make them feel welcome during the break and chat to them maybe. And this is a great initiative from a new group that is to outreach to juniors and newcomers. And I would like to thank Nabila, June, and Harry for doing the door greeting thing tonight and every night so far. All right, one more update about the structure of CocoaHeads. So we don't have a benevolent dictator anymore. There was no dictator emoji, so it's going to be a king. So we don't have a benevolent dictator that does everything. And we've decided to spread the load within a bigger team, so people who want to be involved gathered and figured out a process on how we can split work between everyone. And what did I want to say? Yeah, as I said earlier, we have now a dedicated team to reach to students and juniors. And more importantly, the team is like, it's not like a fixed team of like a few people that organize everything always the same. Like, we're going to be rotating roles, and for example, this month I'm the main organizer. Next month, Rono will be the main organizer, and maybe different people will be taking charge of different roles. So it's a bigger team, there's more people, and we're spreading the skills and the knowledge, so there's no one single point of failure, we could say. And so it's easier to become a volunteer. And like a true open source project, I'll give you a list of simple starter tasks to give you an idea of if you want to be involved with the community, you don't have to run the event and be on stage and make weird statements like I just do. So you can just help maintain the meetup.com page or push a PR for the website. Or you can be an MC, like the person that organized the evening doesn't have to be the person on stage. That can be decoupled as well. You could be a mentor to help beginners that need help to put together presentations. Or you can just help set up the room or clean the room after that. You don't have to like do the one thing that the benevolent dictator used to do before. There's way more roles and smaller roles. And again, there's a Slack channel for that. So join us on Slack if you're interested. And if you don't know who to speak to, you want to be involved, but it's a faceless Slack, you can contact any of those people that helped tonight, and we'll update this slide every month because, as I said, every month it's a slightly different team that may be organizing. If you're interested in presenting on this stage, if you have an interesting topic, there's also a different Slack channel for that. And you can also submit directly from the website. There's a form where you can give a quick idea of what you want to present, what format it would be, lightning talk or full presentation. Someone should make a PR to fix the form, yeah. And in terms of presentations, juniors are welcome. As I mentioned earlier, we have a mentorship team, and we'll reserve a slot each month to have a beginner presenter. And that's something that's already started. Last month, Ron was mentored and did a presentation. This month, we have Priance, who's going to be our first speaker tonight, who also received mentorship from our team. So we want to make sure that everyone, even beginners, have a space in this community, and they don't have to feel like maybe their topics are less interesting because they're beginners or anything. Remember, we're all beginners. Like, for example, SwiftUI, we're all beginners in something at some point. So yeah, we would like to have on stage every month someone who's new and can have a space for that. All right, now it's almost done with all the boring and intro slides, and it's a good time to mention our sponsors. Major sponsor for this year is Cognizant. Our silver sponsors are Domestic Cat, Itty Bitty Apps, Latitude Financial, and of course our venue sponsor is YB Adventures, where we're here tonight. And I would like to run through the community one thing. So we are Melbourne CocoaHeads, but But the name doesn't really work anymore because since last WWDC, SwiftUI was introduced, and we don't have nibs anymore. And you can't really make Cocoa without nibs, right? So I think from this month on, we'll be Melbourne CocoaHeads. So the king is dead, long live the king. Welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads, July 2019. Right, that was a lot of things. But, of course, there's one more thing. I was mentioning a benevolent dictator, and on behalf of everyone here and the 100 of people who have attended over the last 5 years, I'd like to say thank you to Jesse. Thank you very much. So Jesse ran Melbourne CocoaHeads since July 2014. That's about 53 meetups, I think someone counted. You counted. But you're not the one who told it to me. So that's a lot of meetups. How many pizzas have we ordered? How many beers have we drunk? And how many typos we had on the slides? But more seriously, thanks to the reign of our benevolent dictator, we had shorter meetups. It used to last until 9:30 or 10, I think. We had a code of conduct that was introduced, made the community more inclusive. Thanks to Jesse, the Hack Night became a thing. It was even joined with GDG. There was more contact with GDG and the joint Christmas party, for example. He helped set up the live streaming and published a lot of videos on YouTube. So he created a lot for this community, and this is his last month as an honorary organizer tonight. So yeah, you still have the red sticker. Thank you very much, Jesse. What can that mean? No, I don't put you in the spotlight, don't worry. All right, and with all of this, it's time for our first presentation. So I'll welcome Priyansh on stage, and he'll set up. And we're going to start very soon.
Thanks, Jay.
So Priyansh is a marketing specialist in a private school who taught himself iOS last year. He had never done any programming before. And he recently published his first app, which is an app to help, I think, learn and practice math. He's going to tell you more about it in his presentation right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, you probably need the mic.
Is it working? Yep. Okay. Let's put it here. Okay, hi everyone. So I'm here to share my journey. I decided to become an iOS developer, and it's a lightning talk, so it's a quick one, so let's get to it. So when I decided to become an iOS developer in 2017, the first question came to me is from where to start. And I started around 2017 end with Team Treehouse online learning because I was working full-time in marketing, but I failed. The reason was because I was not able to give attention and time and dedication, so it was not working for me. In January 2018, I decided to give it another try, and at that time I started with App Development with Swift course, RMIT. It's like a crash course. By the way, this book, App Development with Swift, is free in books. It's a wonderful resource. How did I do? I did all the exercises which were mentioned in the book at least twice. I watched all the WWDC videos mentioned in the book. Also, I tried and built one or two features which was not mentioned in the book. And this course finished around June 2018. And at the end, I felt like confident. I was getting programming, but not confident enough to go out and start looking for a job or start building my own app. So I started looking online about the resources which I can use to continue my journey. I started asking questions to my mentor that which kind of resources I can use. Another thing I did is I started sharing my work with other people. So whoever with me in the course, I started sharing my code, and every day I was doing something and I was sharing, which helped me. It was my own purpose to be accountable. So after June, I started with Stanford iTunes U course, which was great, but I stumbled on lecture 2. The main reason was I was not ready for it. So I changed strategy a bit, and instead of copying whatever instructor was saying on the screen, I started focusing on the content. If I don't understand any class or a method, I just open documentation and check what it is. And I learned a lot by doing that. Also, I use different resources, which I mentioned later in the presentation, but these 3 resources helped me the most in my journey. There comes December then. By December, actually, I checked my laptop and I developed like 55, 60 apps, but none of them were ready for production. So my mentor gave me best advice that, build an app and put it in the App Store, and that was the best learning happened. So I started working on an app, and first challenge I faced was design. I'm not a designer. I was not a designer at that time. And person was helping me with the design, but she started another job, so she couldn't help. So I have to do it myself, and I thought, okay, let me learn about design. And I made it simple. I opened my phone. I checked all the apps that I was using, just checking and asking questions why the button is here and not there. What happens if I tap something? Is it something as a user I expect, which is happening? Also, I started learning about Sketch. I built few prototypes, few wireframes. I designed some logos, vector assets, and within probably a month, I was ready to design my own app. And then I started coding. Now, funny thing happened is when I decided to build an app, I started with Core ML. So my idea was simple. User doodle number, I get that number with Core ML model and check in my code whether it's right or wrong. After working for 20, 30 days, I realized that my Core ML model was not working for me. The maximum accuracy I was getting was around 85 to 90%, and I thought it's not an app that I can put it, like it's bad user experience. So I changed everything. I redesigned, re-architectured the whole app. And after a little bit of testing, I actually launched my app, and it is now in the App Store, which was wonderful. After that, I decided to build my own website as well. Why not? Every developer has a website, right? So, but I didn't know anything about HTML or CSS, so I use Wix, but there are other resources as well, which if you are in my situation, you can use. After launch, I started getting wonderful reviews. Some of the reviews are here. In one of the schools in USA, some teacher deployed my app to 40 students. I started getting emails like how my app is good, what I can do better, which was really encouraging for me to do more work. I felt like I built something which is actually useful to someone. So that was wonderful. Also, my app has been picked up by App Advice, and they actually featured there. And here, as an independent developer, I did something after I launched my app was I started putting code snippet or something which I was learning, which I felt interesting, online on Instagram. So I'm an Instagram person. I'm not a Twitter person yet. So whenever I was putting something, my app download increased like 20 to 40% on that day. So if you're an independent developer, it might help. Now I'm mentioning all the other resources which I use. If you're a book person, these are some of the books I use, videos, podcast, other websites. For design, I use these resources. Now, I want to mention here that for me, the key was I immersed myself into the environment. So when I started, I was just getting like 20, 30% when I was hearing podcast. But suddenly after 6 months, 7 months, I started getting everything, like 80 to 90%. And then I realized like, wow, working. So I just, whenever I get my hands on something, I was just doing it. So if you're learning something new, it might help, just immerse yourself. My biggest resource is my mentor, Mugund Kumar. Thanks a ton. He helped me a lot. Thank you. So now the next chapter, recently I've been laid off from my work because of some financial trouble with the company after 5.5 years working with them. So now I decided to become full-time developer instead of just working at night and late night and early mornings. So now my future, I decided, is that probably I'm going to launch another 3 or 4 apps in 2-3 months, work with different frameworks and see how it goes. Also, I want to work on my coding skill, writing code that anyone can come and read, increase my knowledge about Swift, and improve my design skill. If you ask me what it takes to become an iOS developer, I would say that there are only 2 things, attitude and persistence. It's not rocket science. Anybody can do it. I did it, so anybody can do it. And in fact, when I finished my course, there was like 22 people who started course with me. And I'm the first one who actually developed an app after finishing the course. And I did it just because I was having this persistence. So it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy if you're working full time, but it's thrilling, fun, and joyride. So, and also I just put this quote because that's what I realized when I developed my own app and I learned about iOS. Push your limits and soon you will find yourself limitless. These are my social media handles, so if you want to reach out to me or ask me or talk with me, so this is where you can find me. Thank you so much for listening to me. I want to say thank you to Sally for helping me with the presentation. Mugund, he's always big help. And my wife, probably, she helped me a lot throughout my journey. So, and thank you for listening to me. Okay. So now the next one.
Thanks, that was amazing. Our next speaker is Jayant. So Priyams will stick around during the break, so if you have any questions.
Yep.
And now we're gonna call Jayant to the stage. Okay. All right, so Jayant is a regular Melbourne CocoaHeads member. He was the organizer for last month, and he's going to tell us all about property wrappers in Swift 5.1. Let's welcome Jayant to the stage.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Property wrappers. Now, one of the reasons is don't have those little blue birds for the Swift UI or the orange one for Swift, because it's still under wraps, it's still under beta. Now, a lot of things could change, hopefully with the revision 3, which is the SE 0258. They've kind of finalized what property wrappers can do. They've gone through property delegates and whatnot, so it's now property wrappers. Right, so what are property wrappers? Now you would see in the videos or in the new code, you'd see a lot of things like these. Oh, the color is, okay. So you'd see a lot of these @ signs, so @state, @object binding, and so on. And if you see the third one, which you can't see very well because of the color, is @CocoaHeads, which means you can create your own, and we're going to look at what can you do with these. How can you create your own property wrappers, and what do they do? So first things first, if you have, and we don't take that badly now, if you do create apps for Android, or if you've ever done Android development, it's the same thing as annotations. So there's a catch-up here and the catch-up there, so everywhere a catch-up. So there are three things you need to do when you actually use property wrappers. You need to declare the wrappers, you need to then declare or use it in a class, and then instantiate it and use it. Three simple things. So let's look at the first thing, declaring a wrapper. How do you declare it? You have the keyword @property wrapper, and then you use a struct, because what it does is basically it wraps your variable inside the struct. So we create a struct called CocoaHeads, and you can have your, the variables that would actually hold the value in it, and you need to have a property called wrapped value. Now, if you don't have that, it wouldn't work. And with that, if you actually run it, you try to compile it, it gives you a segmentation fault. Now, I would have liked that to be interactive, but I'm told no questions during the presentation. Now, why do you get a segment fault? Because it needs to have an initializer. Now, if you've done structs, you know that structs give you an automatic initializer, but the only problem here is that it's an initial value, not the same as your variable. So it doesn't really initialize your variables inside. Now, this is as of now. It could change, but as of now, with beta 3, this is what it is. So when you declare your property wrappers, you need three things now. You need the backing variable, you need the wrapped property, and you need an initializer. If you have these three, you're good. Okay, I can see the colors here, not there. I hope you can see that. So these are the three, actually four things, because that's the keyword that you need to use. Right. Now, the second bit, which is declare or use it in a class. So you say class CocoaHeads, and inside, instead of actually using a variable, you use the property wrapper CocoaHeads, where event type string. So it'll actually hold the value in there. And that's about it. Now, what is the advantage of using this? So you saw we had to write all the getters, the setters, and everything for in the previous slide. So what you do now is by just annotating it with CocoaHeads, you get all of that for free. So every time you want to write like 5 or 6 different variables and you don't have to write all those getters and setters, you can actually kind of have the template, and with one annotation, you get all of that with the variable. So it cuts down on all the boilerplate code and gives you a nice way to template your code. Instantiating and using it. So let July 19 is CocoaHeads, and print July19.event. Now, some of you who've played with it are going to say it's going to print nothing because it's blank. If you look at the last slide, we haven't really initialized it. And when we initialize it with blank, nothing, right? And having said that, if I just created a class like this, it would have worked for me. And I can have an initializer, I can have a host, I can add so many other things to it. So what exactly is the benefit of using property wrappers? Right? No questions? You all good? As I said, one, it saves you a lot of boilerplate code. And on top of that, this is a very simple example. But if you actually get into a little more complex example, which I'm going to show you next, it actually starts making more sense of why you would actually use property wrappers. So here's an example of a property wrapper that works with the user defaults. So I'm calling it defaults, and I'm giving it a generic value type, which means it can be anything, any object, any class. So I'm giving three of my, so the first part is basically I have a key, I have a default value, which is a function, and I have defaults, which is basically I can say which user defaults do I want. So by default, I can have it as standard, and if I want, I can have my own different defaults in there. I have the initializer, which I initialize using a key default value and the defaults. And I set them to the, so I initialize them with the values that I send. Then I create the wrapped value. We said we need to have those three things. So we have the data that's stored, we have the initializer, and we have the wrapped value, where I have a getter, which basically gets the value from the user defaults and returns it back, and a setter, which actually sets the value in the user default, right? And then I have to use it. Now, so this is still the functions, user default get. So I get the value from the user defaults, and I set the value. So it's basically a wrapper on the previous one I'm calling this. Now, when I want to use it, I just say I have a class called user defaults, and in there I have defaults. Key is this okay? The default value is true, and I set my variable is this okay bool. Now, every time I work with is this okay, which is a boolean, every time I set it, it gets set to the user defaults, and every time I get it from user defaults. Now, if you were to actually create 2 or 3 different values like these, there would be a lot more code you would have to write. So now you can actually see how brilliant that property wrapper is, because I can create UD as user defaults, and I print is this okay? It'll print true because I have the default value of true. And if I change it to false, and I print what is in user defaults, I'll actually get false. So every time I change it, it gets persisted to the user defaults. Now, this is only one of the things that you can do with it. There is so much more. I haven't really spoken about it because it really is quite deep. You can use the $, which makes it writable, otherwise it's readable. And it's still kind of like working out, so even I'm kind of exploring it further. And one of the things which I thought, magicians never tell, but you know, we're all programmers, so thank God for that. So I can share how it works. So thank you.
Thanks, Jayant. So now we're going to have a break, 15-minute break. You can come and grab a drink, and you can reach our speakers, Priyance and Jayant, and ask them questions. All right, everyone. Please come back to your seats. We're going to start for the second round of presentations. I don't know. No idea. Can you? All right, we're going to start the second round of presentations. Before we start the second round of presentations, there's 2 announcements to be made, yet other announcements. The first announcement is we are not changing the name of the meetup. I repeat, we are not changing the name of the meetup. It was a joke, okay? Apparently some people, maybe that was my delivery, maybe I looked too serious, I don't know. But just to make it clear, we are not changing. It was just a joke. I couldn't miss the opportunity of saying the sentence, you can't make cocoa without nibs. So yeah, the second announcement is someone forgot to say that they shipped something this month, so I'll give them the mic.
Thanks, Jet. My name's Chris Miles. We haven't technically shipped yet, but we did ship a beta. I work on a developer tool called Xcode, and we shipped our betas, as you hopefully know. And to celebrate the fact that we shipped our betas, we were handing out stickers at the conference, and if you weren't able to attend and get some, I've brought some along. So I'm going to put them out. Let me just give you a sneak preview. Anyone know what that is? Correct. LLVM is the best one, most obscure. This guy. And a bunch more, as you'd expect. Anyway, I'll put these out when the pizza's clear. So help yourself, grab 1 or 2 of your favorites, try and leave some for the rest. I wasn't able to bring too many. And while I've got the mic, I just wanted to also have a chance to thank Jesse for running this meetup for so long. I've been locked away in Cupertino for 4 years, but before that, I was a regular attendee to CocoaHeads for a number of years. I remember when Jesse took over the reins from Sean, done a fantastic job. So I'm really excited to have just the luck to be here on the same day, be in town on the same day that he's handing over the reins again. Thanks, Jesse.
All right, thanks, Chris. And so let's start with our third presentation for the night with Mark. Where is Mark? All right, he's here. So Mark will tell us how to make nice icons and why we still need to draw a pixel grid in 2019.
Hello, so my name is Mark Edwards, and tonight we're going to be learning about how to make nice icons. What do I mean by nice? I mean, for this talk anyway, I'm talking about, hopefully you can see this, pixel-aligned icons that look nice and sharp, like our nice icon on the left, not the not nice icon on the right. Here's another not nice icon and another nice icon. No, they definitely do not look the same. Yet another one. So just to make my point here, going through a few. And here is a document not nice icon. So what's going on there? What's happening is that the icons haven't been designed with the target destination size in mind. So they've been drawn to a grid that doesn't match the actual screen grid that they're being displayed in. This can be for a whole bunch of reasons. It can be just because they were drawn that way. It can be because there's been some scaling going on. So that can, as you can see, at 100%, it looks nice and sharp. At everything else, it looks pretty bad. Obviously, at 200%, it'll look good again. It might be because there's fractional positioning, so sometimes things get shifted around. Certainly if you've got icon fonts or other ways of drawing icons, they can look bad for this reason. It doesn't matter in 2019. Some time ago, we ended up getting phones that had far higher resolution screens, And that meant a lot of the details were now hidden and a lot smaller. You can't actually see individual pixels. So for the iPhone 4, we ended up with twice as many pixels in both dimension and twice the density. Again, here's another representation with the iPhone 10 in the mix as well. So we now have 3x displays. So we now have, where there used to be one pixel on an iPhone 1, we now have 4 on an iPhone 4 and newer devices, and we have 9 on an iPhone 10. But this actually doesn't tell the full story, because each pixel isn't actually a pixel that changes color. It's a bunch of smaller lights. So on the iPhone, we have a red, green, and blue stripe pattern. On the iPhone 4, it was the same. This is pretty common for IPS LCD displays. On the iPhone 10, you'll notice something interesting. The top left pixel actually can't show blue. There is no blue at all. And the center top pixel doesn't have any red. So if your argument is you don't need to draw accurate icons because everything's so high res anyway, this is just an argument showing that the iPhone 10, while the display does look awesome, and I do love the display, it's not necessarily a full 3x display in the traditional sense. Here's a photo close-up of the screen, just in case you don't believe me. Photo's a bit crunchy, but you can see there that there's lots of green dots, one for every pixel, but not for red and blue. There's some other factors as well. So display scaling and display zoom and also Project Catalyst can play a role in this as well. And what they do is they actually change the scaling of what's being shown. And that can also, unfortunately, impact the quality of icons. So you can see for Project Catalyst, everything is actually scaled down about 77%. So that means if you've seen Project Catalyst apps, that's kind of why the text looks a little bit blurry, which is unfortunate. But I guess there's other reasons why the Catalyst is still a good thing. So the question is, does it matter in 2019, given we have high-res devices? No? You think no? Well, I don't know. I think it might matter. I think it still matters. I don't actually see much of an end to this. I don't think there is some magical date where this stuff just doesn't matter anymore. 2019, 2020, I think it's still going to matter. Possibly 2021, 2022. I think it's just forever. I mean, even if we have 4x devices, 5x devices, it's still something that is going to be an issue because it's still a reduction in quality, and there are other reasons why, like display zoom and Catalyst and everything else, where you really want to start with the best quality, and then if it gets reduced a bit from there and there's something you can't do anything about, like for accessibility, zoom and other stuff, then you're at least starting with the best possible initial point. So, how do we make nice icons? Really what you want to do is start designing everything using a 1x grid. So that's 1 point on iOS, and it's 1 dp for Android, 1 point for macOS, and for the web, 1 pixel, as in CSS pixels, which isn't actually 1 display pixel. That's another discussion we can have. Working at 1x is a lot faster, and it's more accurate. So it's not a thing where you need to require more effort. It's actually a lot easier to make high quality icons than it is to make low quality icons, which sounds counterintuitive, but some people manage to do it anyway. The only downside is that you do need to know the target size before you start designing. So you need to work out the size of the icon before you build your entire icon set. Here's an example of a couple of icons being made. As you can see, there's a really coarse grid that I'm working to there, which just makes it super easy. It's like building Lego. You just sort of snap stuff together and then it all falls together quite easily. It also means things like the stroke weights and the positioning, it's always integer offsets. So it's super easy. Just let this finish, do the next one. Sorry? All right, yep. Yeah, so you can see everything, all the strokes, everything's just all integer offsets, which makes it nice and fast. There is another thing you need to be careful of. When you're picking your stroke size, that actually can dictate the icon size, final icon size. If you want a 1 point wide stroke, then you actually need an odd by odd dimensioned icon so that you have a center line on both axes, because icons typically have center lines, and if you use a 1 point wide stroke, as you can see on this example, if you use a 1 point wide stroke on an even by even dimensioned icon, then you end up with a blurry line. So you need to set up your size from the start based on the stroke weight you want to use on the icons. As some general tips, I'd recommend using pings or just drawing stuff with core graphics directly. You can use SVGs via a library. This is for iOS. I guess the same advice is pretty similar for Android, except you probably should use vector drawables on Android. I think eventually we'll have a good vector asset format on iOS. I don't think we're there yet. So PDFs, as some people in this room might know, I'm not a fan of PDFs. Unfortunately, I don't think SF symbols really tick the right boxes either. Just to backtrack a little bit, SF symbols were introduced at WWDC 2019 this year, and it's a new icon set provided by Apple, and a new way of providing icons in your app as well. And it has a lot of conveniences, so it's got a lot of positives. But you might notice something about the tray icon on the top left there. That's actually the bad example from the start. So this is how it looks, and on the left is how it could look if there was a little bit more effort required, or effort taken in getting it nice and pixel snap for the target size being used. In fact, all the icons throughout this entire presentation have been SF symbols for the negative icons, including this one. And, yep, sorry, all of them. So here's what you need to know. You need to design using the 1x grid, so the 1 point grid for iOS and macOS. Unfortunately, you need to know the size, destination size, before you start. This is critical, otherwise you can't design at the same grid that's going to be used to display the icons. And you need to consider the stroke weights you're going to use for the icons as well. So if you want them to be able to be centered in the icon, then you have to choose an either even by even dimensions for the icon or odd by odd. And I know some people won't be able to notice the difference. And I know, obviously, the same thing is true with when you're writing code. There'll be certain things that you care about and other people might not. I really care about this stuff, and I know some people can't see the difference or don't care. I think it's okay to care. I think it's fine to care. I think it's fine to complain. And that's it. So if there's any questions, I think they're going to be taken afterwards, after the next talk, or you can hassle me on Twitter. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Our next presentation is Matt, who's going to tell us about AWS Amplify. All right, please welcome Matt on stage tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of quick questions before we get started. How many in the room work with AWS, know AWS? Hands up. Okay. Back-end infrastructure, hands up if you do it, know it, work with it. Just trying to get a little bit of an idea of how and where I go with this. Okay, cool. So, My presentation is an intro to AWS, leveraging the power of the cloud and React Native. No, not really. I was told I wasn't allowed to do that. And that I'd probably be booed off stage. So we're going to do native iOS development. Who am I? In fact, almost none of you in the room will know who I am because it's my first time here. So hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Muriel. I'm an AWS infrastructure consultant for Cloud Solutions or Redify or Telstra or BTSD or, whatever, doesn't really matter. Cloud with a T seems to be a pretty common one at the moment. I'm an AWS APN ambassador, which basically means I go around telling people how wonderful AWS is and how not wonderful the other cloud providers are. See? Spend most of my time doing serverless work, so serverless apps, serverless functions, serverless backend databases, all of those sorts of things. And to prove that I'm not infallible, I once stated that I don't see the value in containers and that I think they're just a passing fad. Yeah, I was wrong. Yeah, they look like they're going to be here for a while. I'm also trying this thing, this Twitter, that I hear a lot of people talk about. So if you want to, I don't post a lot, but whatever. And I'm also launching a blog, hopefully this weekend, buildinthe.cloud, if anyone's interested. Don't go there now, there's nothing there. So, why am I here? Because after all, I am not an iOS developer, I'm not a Swift developer. I do have a Mac. I don't know if that sort of, that's sort of a bar of entry or something. One of the big things that I find when I talk to a lot of my customers is everyone's got their center of skill, their center of excellence, and unless you're a geeky, techie person, you probably haven't played too much in the AWS landscape beyond the traditional EC2, virtual machines, S3 for storage, maybe RDS for a little bit of database. And when I start talking to you about advanced things like GraphQL, and you've heard of it, but when I start talking about AppSync, your eyes glaze over and you go, what the hell are you talking about? Well, they're the same thing. It's just, that's AWS's terminology for it. When I start talking to you around permissions and IAM, you turn around and you go, what the hell is that? I think I've vaguely heard of that in GCP. Is it the same thing? So, AWS came up with a little bit of an idea a while ago that they'd launched this thing called AWS Amplify to sort of make it easy for everyone who's not a full-time cloud architect or cloud engineer to do things properly and do things easily. So we'll start off with a little bit of a walkthrough. What is AWS Amplify? Why is it useful? Actually, one question I didn't ask. Everybody does know what AWS is, right? Yep, cool. Yeah, it's like Azure, but better. It's the right type of cloud. I used to say it's the right cloud because it's got fewer letters, but then GCP kind of broke that one on me, and oh well. So we'll have a look through AWS Amplify, why it's useful. We'll then have a little bit of a quick look at how to get started with Amplify and how to implement it into an iOS application. Please forgive me, my code is probably not super excellent when it comes to Swift. I did have a look at that Stanford iTunes U course many years ago and went, yeah, this looks interesting. I might, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll get back to this one day. And I think that was, I don't know when that launched, 2015 or 2014 or something. I'll get to it one day. So, AWS Amplify. AWS Amplify, as I mentioned, it's an open source product released by AWS last year. Yeah, I almost went there. It's got two main components. One is an open source framework to allow you to automatically generate and integrate with key AWS services. So things like authentication, API, so whether or not you want a REST API or you want a GraphQL endpoint, things like notification, so you push and you pull notifications, storage for things like S3, VR, because everything has to have a VR or an AR component nowadays or it's not cool. Things like pub sub notifications, locations, tracking, app site integration, all of these sorts of bits and pieces. The other half of AWS Amplify is what they refer to as Amplify Deploy, or the AWS console, or Amplify Console, or the just AWS Amplify when you're reading their official documentation. So it gets a little... Amazon Strong Point is not their documentation, just a heads up on that one. That part is trying to allow you to go, I've built my application, I've built my base cloud components, I now want to do that whole CI/CD toolchain thing that everybody keeps on ragging on about. Click, 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 next, next, finish. In theory, I now have a fully automated CI/CD pipeline. We're going to ignore that bit for tonight, because the last time I did a demonstration on that, it went horribly, horribly bad on me on this stage, so we'll just ignore that one. Why? So we've got our AWS Amplify tool, and I'll walk through in a minute on how we get started with it and what's involved in it and all those sorts of things. But why do we care? Why should we worry about these sorts of things when we can just make it somebody else's problem to worry about the back-end infrastructure and we can just focus on the application? Much like I don't want to have to worry about the application, I'm happy to do the back-end stuff. Somebody else can do the front end. Basically, the key bit for me, and the key reason why I think this is now my 5th or 6th presentation on Amplify this year, is it makes life very, very simple and easy to get started. So somebody looking at this, or having a look at the workshops or the guides that I've written or AWS have written, can get started, go, okay, let's set up my laptop with AWS Amplify. I want to build an application. I want to add multi-user authentication. I want to add a GraphQL endpoint. Here's my GraphQL schema. And hit deploy. Your entire cloud goes away, deploys, builds, has all of the best practice security configured for it. You're now ready to go. You've got a globally scalable, best practice designed, secured environment with the APIs and the SDKs to allow you to consume it in your application, be that JavaScript, iOS, Android, React Native, if you want to go down that path. Pretty much straight out of the box. Now, the CLI will guide you through any questions you don't know. So when you're configuring your authentication, you might ask questions like, well, okay, what fields do I want to capture as a part of my authentication? Do I want to capture their first name, their last name? Do I want a username, or do I want to use their email address as a username? Do I want their date of birth? Which keys do I want to use as the single identifier? I don't know, I'm not an authentication expert. Default config, please. Easy. It'll always default back to the most common scenario, which means I can deploy something I've never done before, like augmented reality or virtual reality, and go, right, well, that was simple. I now have 80% of what I need, and now I've got the code that I can work backwards from. It does everything in what's called CloudFormation templates, which is AWS speak for infrastructure as code, which means if one day you get a professional back-end guy that comes along and you can turn, and they go, Amplify, that's for proof of concepts and getting started. You can go, great, well, here's everything's a CloudFormation template. You can now take that along and implement it into your production workflow. Fantastic. Conversely, if they turn around and go, well, I want to deploy this component that isn't a part of the AWS, the Amplify framework, for argument's sake, let's say we want to start deploying, what would be a good one? Time series data, machine learning algorithms. That's probably not in the framework. We can then go and pull our own CloudFormation template in, integrate it with our application and continue going. So again, we still get all the benefits of the automated CI/CD tooling, the tool chain through our CLI and all of those sorts of things without having to worry about not getting access to the wider AWS cloud, and trust me, there's a lot of it there. So how do we actually get started? The quick and simple easy answer is it's our good friend Node, because apparently everything in AWS world is nowadays. So literally, to get started with Amplify, the first thing we need to do is install it on our machine. That's pretty simple. Sudo, npm install. Let's globally install it so that we can query it from anywhere. AWS Amplify/CLI. Bang, done. We now have all the tools installed on our machine in order to get started. However, it's not actually going to talk to anything. It's the cloud. It's the public cloud. So we're going to need credentials. We're going to need, what region are we going to want to deploy things into, all those sorts of things. So we need to run an Amplify configure. That's going to ask us for things like, what's our secret key? What's our access key to our AWS environment? Do you have an account, or do you need to get set up with one? All of those sorts of questions to get you started. And again, it'll walk you through step by step for anything you don't have. Don't have an account? Easy. Go here, do this, follow these instructions, get an account. Then click on this link and create the access key and the secret key that you don't have, and then copy and paste them into this terminal. And that's it. We're now officially ready to start using the Amplify CLI. So from there, if we have a look at, what do we got? If I come out of that one, and then into that one, everybody should be able to see it. Yeah, man. Every time I connect to this TV, it doesn't like me. There we go. People read that? Yep, good, happy. Okay, so at the moment I'm in my project folder. I've just gone and done the, open Xcode, create new project, call it dummy auth project, nice and simple, and then I've just exited out of Xcode. Nice, simple. All we need to do is come along and say, I want to make this an Amplify project. So we come along and we say, Amplify init, and it's going to come back and say that this is already initialized because we can see that there's an Amplify folder in the thing, but we go Amplify and we go, do we want to use an existing environment? No. So what it's going to ask us is, what do we want to call our environment? Because we want to have multiple environments. We might want to have a cloud environment for our dev. We might want to have a cloud environment for a feature release. We might want to have our production environment. So we'll go ahead and we'll create a dev environment. Do I want to use an existing AWS profile? Yes, I've got lots because I'm an AWS guy. And that's literally it. It's gone, realized it's an iOS project, pulled in all of the relevant naming conventions, and now it's actually going to go into the cloud and create us a dev environment. Now, at the moment, it's not actually going to have much in it because all it's doing is just creating the bare bones. These are the things I'm going to need to be able to add functionality. But that'll take a minute or two. And so that's creating some buckets to store the configuration that we're going to build. It's creating a couple of accounts that are going to control the deployment process, and all of these other things that as somebody who's running through the Amplify process, I don't actually care about. I personally find it interesting, but everybody else who I teach how to run this, yeah, they don't. We now have our cloud environment. Let's say we want to add authentication. Authentication is usually a pretty good thing to have in applications. So I'm not going to run it because it's already in this program and it's going to confuse it. But if I wanted to add Cognito, which is AWS's globally scalable identity platform, which is actually worth looking into if you've never played with it. The first 50,000 users are free, so it's a pretty cheap platform. I think it's then starts at, what is it, 0.04 cents per user per month, no, active user per month or something very cheap. But we can simply just go Amplify, add auth. It'll then go through and ask us, what do we want to collect from the user? In this example, I've gone use defaults, which means it'll ask for the user's It'll ask for a user's username, their email address, and a password. That's pretty simple. Sorry, and their first and last name. We then would need to do an amplify push, because we've told it that it wants we want an authentication platform, but it's actually going to need to go and create it in the cloud. So it's now going to go ahead and create all of those resources in the cloud and push them up, and everybody's all nice and happy. That's going to go and create the dev environment. We already have a production environment, so that's all nice and easy. The next thing we would need to do, because what it's gone and done is created all of these CloudFormation templates and has reference to which Cognito pool we're going to use and which S3 bucket we're going to host our assets in, and all of these sorts of things. We're going to need to pull in a record of that. So if we simply come in here and say add, where is it? Okay, it's grayed out because it's already added, but the AWS configuration.json file contains all of that information and is constantly kept up to date by, so here we go, AWS. Anybody know how to do that in, there we go. Bam, okay. You know what, Macs aren't half bad. So at the moment, that's actually going to repopulate that because it's still doing the dev in the background. So this file is going to keep track of the different environments. But this is where it goes and stores all of those unique pieces of information. What that then means is we can start leveraging it. Almost. Before we do, we need to pull in, if I go, most people here know pod files, and yes, cool, awesome. I'm sort of delving into new ground myself here, so I'm not sure how much of this I'm supposed to know. Awesome. Sweet, works for me. We've gone and added 3 pods here. We've added the user pool sign-in, the AWS user pool sign-in, which basically allows us to leverage and integrate with AWS Cognito. We pull in the AWS Auth UI because I've never really done an iOS project before, so I don't know how to build UIs. So we're just going to use the stock standard one that comes with Cognito. We're going to use the AWS mobile client, which is actually the mobile SDK that Amplify provides in order to integrate with all of the components from Amplify. So that's everything from the push notifications through to the storage, API and graph access and all those sorts of things. So once we've added that, we can then simply come into our app delegate, and all we've done is added in our function here to loop into the mobile client. We've then added our UI return in the did finish loading with options, and obviously we've just imported the mobile client. In our view controller, we've just added some, what I'm told from people who know better than I, is relatively simple code, which was presented out before I zoomed in, but never mind. So that's going to link in with the AWS sign-in manager, do the checked is logged in, and we'll basically loop in the auth UI that we're leveraging from Cognito if we're not. That's all the code we've added. So once we've done that, we can simply run our application and just by adding those 25 lines of code, we theoretically have an application. Now this has got create account logic, it's got forgot my password logic. So what we can actually go, we can go ahead and go, let's go dummy user 99, and we go password test user. And I'm not going to make the mistake I made last time and actually type in my phone number because, okay, password complexity. Yeah, not going to type, fine. There we go. So what that's actually now going to go and do is that's going to send a confirmation email to my phone. Nothing like live demos. Bum, 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 bum. Hey, there we go. So that is confirmation code 311394. Hey, registration was complete. So now that'll automatically log me into my wonderful, beautiful application that does a lot of things. See? How fantastic is that? So you can see that I'm a wonderful developer. Bring a lot of, I think I've got a relatively unique viewpoint on UI design, rather minimalistic, if I do say so myself. Hey, that's the end. No, that's not right. So we've gone through, and apparently that's lost my last slide, but that's okay. So that's a relatively quick, relatively easy, relatively small, low risk, because as I say, my last one went bad. Look at how easy and how quick it is to get started with AWS Amplify and linking that in. Where you go from here is you now have a user that's logged in with a user state into the application that can be passed into an AWS environment and used to access other services. So what we could do is we could build an AWS AppSync environment, for example, which is nothing more than a GraphQL endpoint, and we could say, okay, we can now pass the user's cloud identity in and have AWS take care of all of the silly, annoying things like permissions and security hierarchy and view access and all of those sorts of things. So we don't have to worry about any of that. AWS Amplify is automatically going to turn around and go, the schema says he's only allowed to see his own records, therefore the AWS environment will only give him that back. And it'll take care of all of the security in the back end, and we don't have to worry about anything. All we do is say, here's a schema, go and do it. Here's a user identity, give me back the data. We can loop in storage, S3 buckets, things like that. Again, same rules apply. We can link in pretty much any AWS service and leverage all of the identity and access management controls that we gain by using AWS as our identity endpoint. What this means is that we can focus on building the front end and the user experience without having to really worry about all that back end stuff. But because it's all just being generated as CloudFormation templates, so if we have a look at Scratch. There's my code. Nothing quite like when you see your code. Dummy auth amplify. So for example, that is the actual source code, the actual CloudFormation template that AWS Amplify generated in order to build us our authentication backend. So if we wanted to move away from this, from Amplify at a later date, you could literally just pick up this code and redeploy it in a different account, a different environment, directly using CloudFormation, and you'd get exactly the same the exact same result. All you would then need to do is come into your, where are we? Come into your configuration, say it's populated now because it finished doing its deploy. Come in here and just give it the new pool ID, redeploy your application, and the whole thing's reconfigured. So, happy to stick around for a little bit longer. Obviously, never having presented here before, wasn't quite sure how detailed or how deep people wanted me to go. Happy to come back again, present on anything, you know, AWS. I'll happily even learn iOS development so that I can present. Got another set of people wanting me to learn Android development at the same time, but let's not worry about that right now. So yeah, we'll hang around for a while, answer any questions, and yeah, hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Matt. That was our last presentation. Before we finish off, I'd like to thank our sponsors. Our major sponsor this year is Cognizant, and our silver sponsors are Domestic Cat, EDBD Apps, and Latitude Financial. And our venue sponsor is YBF. We're here tonight. So you can stick around and help us finish the beers and other soft drinks and ask questions to Mark and Matt about how to make nice icons and AWS Amplify. And thank you all for coming. And shortly, in like 15-20 minutes, we'll head out to the Irish Times. So please hang out, ask questions to our speakers, and we'll move on in 15 or 20 minutes. Thank you very much.